Okay, hey everybody, it's Grandmaster Ben Finegold again. You thought you were rid of me, but I have more lectures. I want to thank our sponsor, Philip, and I want to thank him for having the same first name as my middle name, with the one exception is he has an extra P at the end. So he's more Philip than I am. Well, we spell our name the same except for the P at the end. Okay, and he wanted me to do a lecture on the London system, but in particular, if you see the London system here on Wikipedia, you have to go down, 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 and there we go. The rapport Jobava system, okay, which there's a picture of a sample game from that. And some people call it the Jobava London, and they don't use Rapport's name at all. So it's not up to me. I found games from like 2014 that Jobava was playing it. So it's been around for 10 years at least. Probably it was around before then, but nobody good was playing it. So everything's around. Then when some super grandmaster decides to play, then they do. Okay, that's too bad. Will missed all my crazy talk about nothing. Okay, so everybody's here now. Make sure you're all muted and so forth. Okay, so the rapport Jobava system has to do with, as it says, combining bishop f4 with knight c3. Then it gives sample games that are not from the rapport Jobava, just from the regular London system. It gives 3 random games for some reason. I'm not sure. One of them's from 2023. So that's updated recently. Now, if you're really interested in the Jobava rapport Jobava London system, you're not going to learn nothing in this lecture, but thanks for paying, for those of you who did pay. You can buy a book on the rapport Jobava London by Ginger GM, who's one of the most famous and infamous GMs in England right now, mainly infamous. So, okay. Let's go to the games. And before we play games over, I have 4 games for you today. We are going to talk about the opening a little bit and how it differentiates from other openings, including the non-Jobava London. Okay, so I'll just make some moves on this board. There's 3 move orders that are quite common. Okay, the least common seems to be this one. Okay, and this is the starting position for our lecture. The most common seems to be this one, and then bishop f4. And the one that's in the middle is d4, d5, knight c3, knight f6, bishop f4. Of course, there's a 4th move order, which is d4, d5, bishop f4, knight f6, knight c3. And I mean, you can play all 4 move orders. And when you play knight c3 on move 2, especially after knight f6, now if white could move again, he would probably play e4. So typically, black is going to play d5 here. And the reason is, after d4, knight f6, we're not going to see a lot of Pierts, because typically black isn't playing that. Okay, but if you decide you're going to play the Jobava London with white, obviously it takes 2 to tango. So if you decide to play any opening with either color, your opponent has to also play the opening. You can't just close your eyes. And a lot of people who play the London who are lower rated, they're just putting their pieces on the same squares every game, because that's what the London can afford you. You can sort of make the same moves every game, irrespective of what your opponent's doing. And if you play any opening, you can't really do that all the time. You could do it half the time or most of the time. So of course, if you play d4 and your opponent plays the Dutch, or they play c5 on move 1, or they play e6 on move 1, it's unlikely that you're going to play a Jobava London. Very unlikely. Although it's still possible to transpose somehow. But if they play knight f6 or d5, which are the most common moves for black, then you have good chances to play a Jobava London. And I think if you want to play the Jobava London, if you're like, I got to play it, because I saw Ben lecture about it, or I bought Ginger GM's book on it, Simon Williams is his real name, then you probably want to play knight c3 first, because then it's very likely black will play d5, and then you can play bishop f4, and this is the starting position. If you play bishop f4, it's possible your opponent won't play d5, which is fine, but then you're not playing the Jobava London. Your opponent could play g6 or c5 or d6 here, and maybe you could try to transpose, but it's more likely if you want your opponent to play d5, you should play knight c3, then they'll probably play d5. But they don't have to. Okay, they could play other moves like d6 or g6 or e6. So when I did my Chessable course, which is finished, and I have a couple more that are on the way, most of the complaints were that I didn't cover certain moves in certain positions because that's impossible. I can't cover every legal move in every position. I have to cover ones that people are most likely to see and that meet the demands of the opening, that are that opening. So black has 20 to 30 moves in every position. Can't cover all of them because then the Chessable course would be, would take 1 million hours to finish. So it would be sort of pointless. And so I can't look at everything, but everything I do look at in this particular lecture will start with this position. And the move order can change, but this position will occur. Now, the most important question and the best thing to learn from this particular lecture is what is the difference between the Jobava London or the Rapport Jobava London, if you like Richard Rapport, and the regular London. Okay, and obviously that's the move knight c3, but how does that change things? Knight c3 does 3 things that typically white doesn't do in the non-Jobava London, in the regular London. And that is, white often plays knight b5 and attacks this pawn. So if black wants to lose right away, black can play moves like knight c6 and knight bd7, and then after knight b5 go, oh, I missed that. Okay, and typically, after knight b5, black plays the move knight a6. So the point of knight b5 isn't to win immediately, because your opponent's going to see that, maybe, although you could win immediately. The point is you're forcing your opponent to play knight a6, and they may not want to play knight a6 because a6 is a bad square for the knight. Okay, the other thing white can do in the Jobava London is white can play e4. White doesn't have to play e4, but sometimes white plays e4 pretty quickly. Whereas in the regular London, why not c6 instead of knight a6? I have the same question. Okay, yeah, if you have questions, you should say them out loud. You should never chat. Never. Chatting is wrong. Okay.
Not knight a6, I think he means just a6. But why not a6 instead of, or maybe he does mean knight a6. But
no, he means c6. Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, neither one of you understood my point. My point is, when white plays knight b5, then black plays knight a6. Black's not playing knight a6 here. Okay, so obviously, black could play a6 or c6 here, which is fine. I'm just saying if white plays knight b5, you can't play a c6 or a6 because knight c7 check. So knight a6 is the move in response to knight b5. If you don't want to face knight b5, because you don't want to play knight a6, that's fine. Then you would play a6 or c6 in this position, which you can do. I'm not telling you not to do it. It's slow, but it's okay. But if your opponent does play knight b5, then you can't respond to that with c6 or a6 because it's already too late for that. Okay, and the other thing white can do other than e4 is white can castle queenside very quickly. White doesn't have to castle queenside, but I would say he usually does. So the three things that are different between this London, the Jobava London, and the regular London is knight b5 is sometimes annoying, e4 is sometimes annoying, and sometimes white moves his queen to d3 or d2 and then castles queenside and pushes his kingside pawns. Okay, John Fontaine style. Okay, that's a good style. Okay, but anyway, let's look at the games and we'll see what's happening. Now, in my opinion, which some people may not share, okay, but I gotta tell you what I think. I think if you play a Jobava London with either color, this is gonna be good for the better player. I think that the better player is gonna win. The one who's trickier, the one who's better at tactics, the one who's better at non-theoretical positions. I think if you like boring chess and solid chess and incrementally increasing your advantage, the Jobava London may not be for you. But if you like craziness and weird positions, then that's just your game. Okay, so let's see what actually happened. Okay, so this is the move order they played. This is probably the most common move order, d4, knight c3, bishop f4. Okay, and the first game is the game Artemiev versus Mamedyarov. And one thing I like to do when I teach a class and show games is I like the players to be about equivalent strength. If I show you a game that a 2600 beat a 1400, that doesn't really give you the sense of the opening. That just shows you that the 2600 player is better than the 1400 player, which we already knew. So in these games, white and black are about the same strength. Okay, most people would probably argue that Mamedyarov is better than Artemiev. So, okay. And wait, is this Mamedyarov or Nepo? It is Mamedyarov, okay. Okay, so Mamedyarov played the move bishop f5, which is a common move. And typically in these positions, when black develops his bishop early, white is going to play either f3 and g4, or f3 and e4, or h3 and g4, and start attacking on the king side right away. The queen's going to go to d2, and I'll castle queenside. Typically, that's what white does. White doesn't have to do that, but that's sort of standard practice. Okay, Artemiev played f3, always play f3, and now he's going to play either g4 or e4. e4 is a pawn sacrifice, so more likely he'll play g4, and he'll just push his kingside pawns since his king can castle queenside, and he'll have an initiative on the king side. Black played e6, white did play g4, bishop g6, h4, white's threatening h5. And this kind of pawn advance is typical in the Jobava London, because in the regular London, usually white's knight is on f3. So then we're not playing pawn f3 because it's illegal. And here, white's leaving his kingside pieces alone, and he's playing very energetically on the king side. And again, for a lot of people, like I would say me, this is, not so fun to play all the time, because you get some weird positions and you might get in trouble early because you're not used to it. And therefore, the Jobava London typically would favor white, just for the reason that the person who has white is playing the Jobava London, the person with black is playing against everything, so maybe they're not an expert on the opening. And if you're always playing the Jobava London and you get positions like this, you're not as perturbed as I would be playing g4, h4 in the opening. If that's the kind of play that you like, playing aggressively on the king side and getting out of opening theory, then, okay, the Jobava London. Okay, black played h5, which stops white from playing h5. White plays g5, black plays knight d7. This is a typical kind of pawn structure you would see with this white having a kingside attack. e3, now white can get his other pieces out. c5. And finally, white plays knight b5, White could have played knight b5 every move. And he decided to do it now because now his pawn's on e3. And you're like, what does the pawn on e3 have to do with knight b5? I'm glad you asked. Okay, because in this position before e3 and the moves previous to this, if you play knight b5, you can still do it, and black's going to play knight a6. But some people don't want to play knight b5 before e3 because they're afraid of a later queen a5 check winning their knight, which obviously isn't the case when the knight's defended. So white could have played knight b5 here, and then after knight a6, he should be okay. But in this position, white wanted to wait for black to play c5, because after knight b5, knight a6, black's next move could be c6, kicking the knight. However, that's impossible after c5. So Artemiev is like, okay, he's not going to kick my knight. My knight can sit on b5 the rest of the game. So I know some people who are more cautious than Mamedyarov. Mamedyarov is not cautious, who would play a6 here if they wanted to play c5. That way they'd play a6, then c5, and there's no knight b5. And the problem with knight b5 in some Jobava Londons for black is you can't kick out the knight, so the knight just sits there up in your grill, and your knight's on a6 being silly, being defensive, being passive on the side of the board. So some would argue c5 is not the best move. Obviously, Mamedyarov saw knight b5 and thought knight a6, no big deal. Okay, so he didn't care. And if you do care, then you have to lose a tempo probably by playing either c6 or a6. Although, if you play c6, I don't know where your knight on b8 is going. I don't like that move at all. a6 seems okay. You're losing a tempo, but the center is closed, so you can probably afford it. Okay, c5, knight b5. Black has to play knight a6, stopping knight c7 check. And white plays c3. And white's just going to play a normal chess game where his knight's on b5 and black's knight is on a6. So that should favor white. And black cannot easily play knight c7 because white's bishop is on f4. Although, if black could play knight c7, it's not a big deal either for white. It's not super aggressive. Okay, so bishop e7, developing his last minor piece, and we have a question. Anybody? Somebody said something? No? All right. I noticed Will Ree's not there and his microphone isn't off. Boo, boo. So he's banned. Okay, although he probably is there. He probably has some funny thing. Okay, yeah, he's there. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so bishop d3. White's developing all of his other pieces. Queen b6. That's not a move that I would play. If I was black, and I'm not as good as Mamedyarov, but if I was black, I would definitely take this and play g6. I don't want white to play g6 because that's annoying. Okay, but Mamedyarov is better than me. He played queen b6, and Mamedyarov doesn't know if he's going to castle kingside or queenside yet. That depends on what white does. In fact, white doesn't know if he's going to castle kingside or queenside or not castle. So these kinds of positions you don't usually see in other openings where a lot of things have happened and nobody's castled and we don't know which way people are going to castle. That's a little unusual. That's why Jobava and Rapport like this opening. It's unusual. They like unusual openings. They want to think for themselves early in the game and not have their opponent blitz out 20 moves. Okay, white played a4. Notice if white plays bishop takes g6, black could play queen takes b5, threatening the bishop on g6 and the pawn on b2. That would be a double attack. So Artemiev played a4. Now the knight's defended. So now if white ever trades bishop on g6, that's fine. Okay, he played knight f8. He doesn't want to have messed up pawns, but knight f8 looks like a strange move. Even my dogs are barking. That's how strange it is. Knight e2, that's a normal developing move. And I mean, I'm not going to analyze forever, but just by optically looking at the position, because that's how you look optically, it looks like white's better. Black's knight on a6 I don't like. I like white's knight on b5. I don't like black's knight on f8. White has more space on the king side. I just like white. So looks like this has been successful for white. Okay, Mamedyarov traded bishops and played knight g6. Bishop went back to g3, and he finally castled. Okay, and white castled kingside also. I mean, white's played a4, so he probably doesn't want to castle queenside. And his king is safe on the king side. A lot of black pieces are over here. So I'm not really worried about getting my king attacked. I got bishop on g3, a knight on e2, rook on f1. My king's pretty safe. Okay, now if black wants to attack the white king side, can't play f6, mainly for the reason never play f6. But there's another reason. It hangs the knight on g6. Boy, I couldn't even do it. The computer got mad at me. Okay, so black played c takes d4, making white make a decision here. When I play the London with white, which I don't, I always play e takes d4. C takes d4 looks more like an exchange Slav. Okay, so e takes d4. This still kills the knight. If white had played c takes d4, black would have had knight b5, knight b4, just like white had knight b5. Okay, now white has an obvious plan, which I think he did, which is to play f4, f5. That's like the only pawn break that makes any sense. Okay, rook fc8. White played f4, as advertised. Bishop f8, always play bishop f8. Black wants to play knight e7 and knight f5 and block the f pawn. So f5, e takes f5, queen takes f5. Now we have a double attack. We're threatening this pawn and this pawn. And now the pawn structure is clearly favorable to white because black has an isolated d pawn. And obviously, this knight it just has no future. I mean, the knight is terrible. Okay, well, we have to stop queen takes f7 check. So he played queen e6, defending f7 and d5, also attacking the knight. Artemiev traded queens. Now, black's pawn structure is a little loose, but black's pieces are all terrible. His bishop on f8 can't go anywhere good. Knight on a6 can't go anywhere. The e6 pawn is really weak. Okay, rook e1. I said the e6 pawn was weak. Okay, rook c6, defending his pawn. Knight c1. The knight's going to go to d3, and the rook is on this pawn, and my knight has lots of good potential squares here. b6. I don't know what that does. Knight d3. Bishop e7. Rook e2. White has a very simple idea. Double the rooks. Bishop d8, terrible. So black has been playing to play knight c7. So he's got a rook on c6, bishop on d8. Finally, he can try to play knight c7, except that he can't, because white trades everything, and the rook needs to defend this e-pawn. So very suspicious. Okay, rook e1. Here comes the e-pawn attack. King f7. Black's position's hanging by a thread. White has all the initiative. Black is very defensive and passive. Knight d6 check. That blocks the rook from the e-pawn. So the king went back. Rook takes e6. Black could resign now. Black played king h7. And white played a very simple maneuver that won. Very simple. Even the people in the chat can get it. White has a winning tactic here. If you do tactics on chess.com or Lee Chess, this position could pop up and you would solve it very quickly. Just like Artemiev did. Anybody? What's that? Always sacrifice the exchange, right. And in this position, instead of resigning, Mamedyarov took. Resigning would have been better. And then knight e5 check wins the rook on c6 and white's up a piece. Also, white's probably mating black, but that's a separate issue. And Mamedyarov resigned. Now, I think that was a rapid game, like 25 minutes each. But you can see black just got blown off the board. He was like slightly worse, then clearly worse, then he was just lost. And again, these openings aren't super popular, but they're becoming popular because 2700s are playing them and winning. And in rapid chess and blitz chess, everybody's playing it. Okay, Magnus will play it, Hikaru will play it. Everybody's going to play these openings because they're very tricky. They get unusual positions where your opponent can't just make 20 moves of theory and equalize, like with a lot of other openings. Okay, Mamedyarov is also, I think, the customer in the next game. Yeah. Okay, he's playing Jobava. It's called the Jobava London, so I wanted to put some Jobava games in there. That seemed reasonable. Okay, Jobava is white, and we see the same move order. So this must be the most common move order. D4, knight f6, knight c3, and bishop f4. Okay, in the last game, black played bishop f5. Same in this game. Jobava played f3. Now a different player is white. So Mamedyarov is facing this line over and over, and he always loses. So it can't be that bad for white. If it was bad for white, Mamedyarov would just be winning with black. Okay, e6, this is the same. This is all the same. And he played h6. So in the previous game, Mamedyarov played h5. Against Jobava, he plays h6. I think actually this game was played first. Okay, e3. Again, he wants to wait with knight b5 until black plays c5. c5. Plays h5, making the bishop go back. And then knight b5. Again, if Mamedyarov wanted to, he could lose a tempo with a6 and then play c5. But I guess he doesn't want to. I guess he doesn't care about knight b5, although I think he's wrong. He's wrong every game, so that makes me look bad. Mamedyarov does something over and over again, probably not wrong, but maybe he is. Keeps losing. Okay, c3. And this looks like the other game, except black's pawn isn't on h5 and black's knight isn't on d7. Okay, bishop e7, bishop d3. Takes. Knight d7, just like in the other game, but without g5. Knight e2. And once again, just from looking at the position, I like white because white's knight is on b5, black's knight's on a6. And, white has a nice position. White has space everywhere. White's developed everywhere. Black is very passive. And what a lot of my students do, when I used to teach a lot, they always ask me the same question over and over again. What do I do here? Like what am I, the chess teacher? Oh, wait, I am the chess teacher. What do I do in this position? What do I do in this position? What do I do in this position? Whenever I tell them, your move hung mate in 1 and your move hangs a queen, they're like, what should I do? And my answer is, don't hang a queen, don't hang mate in 1. But the question they should ask, which they never do, is, what is my opponent going to do? And you always ask yourself in these positions when somebody has more space. Okay, white is just better. White has more space than black. White's pieces are better than black's pieces. And so a better question is, what is black going to do? And the answer is, I don't know. That's why I like white. If I had black in this position, I wouldn't know what to do. Because my pieces seem like they're on reasonable squares, except for this. I don't really see how to put them on better squares or how to do some kind of pawn break that would bust open the position for... I don't see how black does any of that.
Can we do c4, queen retreats, knight a3, threatening...
Knight a3?
c4, then the queen retreats, and then the knight... Oh, yeah. And then after queen a5, attacking the knight.
Uh-huh.
And then...
Then why would play a4 just like in the previous game?
Okay.
You hate when that happens, but it actually happened in the last game.
Sure.
You were like, make that knight go to a3, then I win. Yeah. No, you're right. If I didn't play a4, you'd be correct. Okay, so black castled, which was the style at the time. Jobava played a4 because he knew what your question would be. Bishop f6. It looks like black wants to play e5. Bishop d6. Little fork in there. Rook e8. f4. So Jobava stops e5. And now, black is sort of out of ideas. There's not really a pawn break for black. And typically, what I would do in this position if I could, which I can't, is I want to play knight b8, knight c6, a6. Problem is, you ever play knight b8, knight c7 is winning. I can't get that in. I can't do anything. So bishop d6, f4 was a really good concept from Jobava to stop black from playing e5. Black played knight b6, hitting the bishop. Jobava played g5 because he's Jobava. I would never play g5 here. I don't know if I would consider g5, but I'm not Jobava. I'm like a normal person. If I was white, I would consider d takes c5, and I assume Mamedyarov would play knight c4. And now I'm just confused. Now with the d pawn gone, black can get an e5 pretty easily. Although I think I would play d takes c5. But okay, Jobava played g5. He's Jobava. And black traded. White played h6. White's playing for mate. White's king can go to the queen side, but he could just leave his king on e1 because it's safe. The only reason to move your king for white is to get this rook into the game, not for the king to be safe. The king's pretty safe on e1. The center's just completely blocked. Okay, Mamedyarov played g6. That's what I would play. fg, bishop g5, h7 check, king g7, bishop e5 check. Never play f6. Knight d6. So this is a brilliant move from Jobava, sacrificing material to get at black's king. What's funny is the two games I'm showing you this lecture that Mamedyarov loses, I'm sure he'd want to have white in those games. That's just up his alley, is the way white's playing these games. Mamedyarov not good at defending positions where his king is open. Mamedyarov is good at attacking opponents' kings that are open. So this isn't the kind of position Mamedyarov likes. He would like it if he was white. Okay, he played rook h8. He decides not to take the bishop. If you take the bishop, I check, and then I queen. And then you lose your queen. And black has two pieces for a queen. And the pieces are over here. Ugh. Boo. Okay, so Mamedyarov didn't fall for that. He played rook h8. Knight f4, threatening knight takes e6 check and queen takes g6 check. I don't know which move is better, but knight takes e6 is actually mate. Therefore, it's better. Queen takes g6 is mate in 2. In any case, I think you have to take that knight. Okay, he took the knight because you can't allow any of that stuff. Bishop takes. Now black's king is just open and white's only sacrificed one pawn. g5, probably a bad move. Long castle, waiting for him to take the bishop, rook g1 check, queen g6, etc. Also, I'm certain rook g8 check wins. Even if it doesn't, I'm certain it wins. Okay, so he doesn't take the bishop. He plays knight c4, rook h6, a brilliant move from Jobava. Okay, the obvious idea is if you take the rook, knight f7 check wins your queen. If you don't take the rook, rook g6 check, and more likely queen g6 check is going to win the game. How do you stop queen g6 check? How do you stop rook g6 check? I don't know. Okay, so he played king takes rook, losing his queen. If he plays knight takes, queen g6 check, king f8, only legal move, bishop takes. Now, normally I would say black has one legal move here, but black can play queen e7. I don't recommend it. Okay, don't play queen e7. Okay, queen takes check, only legal move, queen takes check. Black loses all of his pieces and white gets an extra queen. So this is like a game I'm playing on stream against like a 500 player. Okay, but Mamedyarov is better than 500. Can't really tell. Okay, so he played king takes rook, that's best. Knight takes queen. b3, kicking the knight. Knight goes back. Rook g1. e4, white's still coming. e5, sacrificing his bishop. And after it takes, he plays queen g6. Now, white's threatening queen takes f6 check, which you can't allow. You can't allow that. Okay, so he didn't. He played rook f8. I think that's the only move. I guess you could play knight d7. That would lead to the same thing. Takes, and now he just resigned. White has a very simple plan. I'm going to tell you the plan, then you're going to tell me how to stop it. And by telling me how to stop it, you can't stop it, so you're not going to tell me. White's plan is to play f7 next move. You can't take with either rook because you get mated. And then I play queen g8 mate. And take with mate either way. So if black plays like rook f7, rook h1 is going to be mate. If black plays the other rook f7, this is mate. If you don't play either rook to f7, I play f7. And if you play either rook to f7, then it's the same thing. If you don't, then queen g8 is going to be mate. So even though black is slightly ahead of material here, these knights aren't doing a good job defending the king, and Mamedyarov resigned because there's no defense to f7. So that was a brilliant finish by Jobava, but we got that really weird kind of game where it wasn't clear who was going to castle where. Eventually they castled opposite sides, and Jobava already had g4 and h5 in, and black got no attack against white's king. And the knight never moved from a6. Now, it doesn't mean that white wins by force. It means that if your opponent's one of the top players in the world, they can still lose to this opening. So this opening is hard to play against. Okay, and then we're going to do Jobava again. I mean, it's called the Jobava London. This is his game with Jan Nepomniachtchi. Oh, no, it's not. It's his game with Luke van Wely. This is from a rapid tournament in Dubai. Luke van Wely used to be the Dutch player that got invited to Tata Steel every year because they would invite Jan Timman, because he's Timman. Then they would invite Van Wely. And then at some point, Timman got older, so they just started inviting Van Wely. And now Van Wely is older, so they don't invite Van Wely anymore. But he was the best player in Holland after Timman. And then when Timman was retiring or not playing much, Luke van Wely was 2,700 FIDE. So he played in a lot of the Tata Steel tournaments, which used to be called Hogovens and Vaikanze and all that. Okay, so he has black against Jobava, same move order. This will be the preferred move order. And he played g6. And g6 is usually what I do when I'm black and somebody plays some kind of London. I usually play g6. Okay, queen d2. Looks like Jobava is going to castle queenside. Bishop g7, bishop h6. Again, people just aren't prepared for these lines because there's so many possible ways to play with both sides. And white's just going to attack on the king's side and castle queen's side. And he's going to be like, what are you going to do about it? Okay, so bishop takes, queen takes. c5, black's counterattacking in the center. e3, knight c6. Jobava castles. Takes, takes. Queen d6. Black can't castle king's side, but maybe he can castle queen's side. f3, never play f3. That stops knight g4, bishop g4, knight e4, and it prepares to play g4 later, in case of like bishop f5, for example. a6, stopping knight b5, knight e2, and the players develop their pieces. White always plays king b1. Van Wely decides not to castle and plays rook c8, getting his rook on the open line. And we saw this maneuver before. Knight c1 was played in a previous game, then white played knight to d3. This game was a little different. Knight a5, he played knight to b3. He says, if you're going to play knight c4, I'm going to play knight c5. So he trades. Again, white's king looks safer than black's. Black's king's in the center, can't castle. White's king is all tucked away on the queen side. b5, Van Wely tries to attack. Bishop d3, developing his last piece. Bishop f5, they traded. Rook e1, very simple play from white. Develops his pieces, castles, plays king b1, and black's king is suffering. And in this position, or maybe it was in a move or two, Van Wely lost tactically. He couldn't handle the tactics. Although, to be honest with you, I'm not sure what black should do because white has a big threat here, which Van Wely, I think, didn't see. Although if he did see it, I can't really help him so much. You can't, king is on e8. Okay, but he played rook g8, which makes sense. The rook's on the open file, but that overlooks a tactic. I see the tactic, and I don't know what to do about it. So it's possible he did see the tactic, but there's nothing he can do about it. I don't know. He played rook g8, then knight takes d5. Now, I know he played knight takes d5 because I prepared for this lecture, but I didn't realize that he didn't blunder it, that he just couldn't stop it. Can't play e6, your knight's hanging. Rook d8 doesn't stop it, I still play knight takes d8. Oh no, rook d8.
King d7.
What's that? King d7? No. I saw king d7, but I didn't want to do it. Then probably rook e5. You still can't play e6. Yeah, I didn't want to play king d7. Now, if you play rook d8 and he takes this and you take with the knight, now your queen's defended. Although it's silly to play rook d8 when you put your rook on the open file. Now you're playing rook d8 for defensive purposes. Then I assume white just wins by playing rook e5 and doubling rooks. And there's too many weak things in black's position here. And black's king is no good. What's that?
Rook c6.
Rook c6 has the same kind of defense. But yeah, I think after rook e5, you're just going to lose a pawn or two. Like your f-pawn's hanging. I'm going to double the rooks, threatening e7. Black's just defending and his king is on e8. But yeah, I think if he saw knight takes d5, he probably would have played rook c6 or rook d8 just to stop it. But I think he didn't see it. Knight takes d5. You can't take with the knight because you lose your queen. White has incredible threats here. Knight takes f6 winning. Queen takes f6 winning. Rook takes e7 winning. Knight takes e7 winning. So black has to take that knight. Now white's threatening mate in 1. Take on e7. So e6. Rook d2. Defending his c pawn and preparing to double the rooks on the e file. King f8. Rook e5. d5. I like the way he pre-defended his c pawn. So black never has counterplay with making a battery here. That was black's only play. Also, he defended the g pawn. That's probably even more important. He defended all of his possible weaknesses. Rook c7. Queen h6 check. It's over. They're just playing it out. He's not resigning. Takes. And now you notice when he played queen h6 check, the reason was to defend his rook. Now black is super losing. So black resigned here. Now you know why it's called the Jobava London. Go Jobava. Okay, last game is by another world-class player. This is a Blitz game who also plays the Jobava London. Although I noticed in the World Junior Championship, which just finished, he was playing c4 on move 2. So maybe he's played it too much. He's playing Dmitry Svetushkin. This was a Title Tuesday game in a Blitz tournament. And this is another line you have to know with either, wow, they play different move order. Okay, they got a different move order, and they got this position. Now, of course, you could get this position through the regular move order, the one that we looked at the other 3 games, and then c5. We didn't look at c5 yet. We've looked at bishop f5. We've looked at g6. Okay. And in this position, white can play knight b5, but then we have queen here. Then we have queen a5 check attacking the knight. So that doesn't make any sense. Can't play knight b5 yet. White could play a slow move like e3 or knight f3, but Hans Niemann, who plays the Jobava London quite often, and I think he might have written a Chessable course about it, he played the move e4, confusing the audience. And that's what Hans wants to do. He wants to confuse his opponent and then outplay him in the tactics. That's Hans's method, is to get unusual positions that are very tricky, and then he's better at those positions than his opponent. So playing a Russian grandmaster, you would think Hans, who's lower rated than him, Hans would be able to punish him in the tactics. Now black can play any move here. Black can take on e4, black can take on d4. But okay, he decided to take on e4. Hans took on c5. And they ended up trading queens. I saw a game where black played queen a5 here, which black also lost. But queen a5 is another move. traded queens. Now we have equal material, but white has a big lead in development. White has 3 pieces out to 1, and white's bishop can get out, and black's bishop can't. So this position got to be favorable to white, because white just has more development. A6, stopping knight b5. Knight b5 would have been annoying. Knight e2, bishop f5, knight g3, bishop g6. Black finds a way to save his pawn on e4. h4, threatening h5. h5 anyway. b4, white has a 4-2 majority, which is fortuitous for him, on the queen side, so he defends his c-pawn and gets his majority going. Knight c6, a3, and black's pieces just aren't very good. The bishop's trapped here. This bishop's not very good. There's some holes in the position here. Maybe white can come in. Bishop c4, bishop e7, castles. White just wants to play rook e1 and take this pawn on e4. a5, trying to attack white's position on the queen side. b5. And now Hans does something really good, which I'm sure his opponent missed. In this position, Hans's c-pawn is hanging, so you would think like bishop d6, or bishop e3, or knight takes e4, or knight a4 would be moves that you'd look at. You wouldn't look at the following move because it looks like it blunders a pawn. c6. Hans always looking for aggressive moves. You have to take the pawn. You can't let me take on b7 or play c7. And now I play b6, and I've crashed through on the queen side. My bishop's defending the b8 square, so black can't play knight c8 because b7 wins a piece, at least. Maybe more than a piece, maybe a rook. So he played knight b5, that's forced. Takes, b7 winning the exchange. And then black and white start to take pawns. Everybody takes pawns, and white's up the exchange for a pawn. He plays gf instead of bishop takes f6. I can see why you do that. You give your king a square, and your bishop is attacking the a pawn. That actually makes sense to me. Rook d7, bishop takes the pawn, plays knight f1, the knight's coming back into the center. And unfortunately, the white rooks are too good on the 8th and 7th rank here against the king. And he has another trick too. Bishop b4 attacking the rook. Rook e3, he's coming in this way also. Rook to g3 check. Rook c1, which is the losing move. I think in this position, black has to play king f8. And then the game is still a game. But rook c1 looks pretty good. It pins the knight. But now he has rook d8 check, which I think black missed. And now rook g3 check, and we're getting you from both sides. So you're going to lose a piece here. If you play, he resigned. If you play king g7, rook here wins a piece. You have to play bishop g6. And then it gets even worse after you lose a piece. Then I play rook d7 check, and I take on g6. Man, the truth hurts. And if you play bishop f8, always play bishop f8. That's even worse. And now you either get mated or you lose everything. Now we're threatening g7. Man. So that was an exciting game. It could have gone either way. And in time trouble, black blundered rook g3 check. But that's the kind of game that Hans likes, especially in blitz chess, where it's double-edged and you don't know who's better. Pawn structure is not the same. It's not symmetrical. And you'll see that a lot in the Jobava London. In the regular London, where white doesn't play knight c3, typically white plays more solid, more Kamsky-like, more Carlsen-like, and tries to build a slow, steady advantage. In the Jobava London, white is trying to get an attack on the king side, the queen side, make the game unusual, and put the opponent under pressure right away, and often castle queen side. In the regular London, we don't see a lot of queenside castling for white. In the Jobava London, we see it all the time. Well, I hope you liked that lecture on the Jobava London. Don't tell Richard Rapport I called it the Jobava London. He'll get mad. And I want to thank Philip, our sponsor, for sponsoring the lecture. If you want to sponsor a lecture, contact Karen at atlchessclub.com, and you can sponsor a lecture too. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks to my live audience too. Bye.